Are the security services, the army in particular, being put on standby? It's a horrible thing to contemplate, but I guess they are.
Well, there is part of the undercurrent. There's a growing undercurrent of fear and distrust because there's been a Cold War between the ruling African National Congress and the local Democratic Alliance. This has been exacerbated by Bell Pottinger. You're probably aware of the Bell Pottinger drama playing out in UK, where propaganda was developed that heightened tensions, racial tensions in the country. So there's actually talk at the moment of some kind of state of emergency, and there's growing fear of people in Cape Town on the streets because they believe that a state of emergency is some kind of sinister undercurrent to it. Now, I'm not sure that I don't buy into the sinister stuff, but certainly this is what people are starting to feel. The bottom line is that this is the moment where I think we need a Churchill. This is the moment where we need someone to say we'll fight them on the beaches, and we will never surrender. And unfortunately, neither of the political parties have got leadership of sufficient credibility or stature that's actually stepped up to the plate. So people, by and large, are actually left to pretty much fend for themselves, and this is part of the problem.
Now, presumably people who've got wherewithal and money are starting to find ways of finding their own water sources, maybe drilling down for wells, that kind of thing, maybe finding ways to store water on their property. That is always going to happen when you've got some people with more money than others, but the rest of the population are not going to be fortunate enough to do that, and that is going to create even more tension if this is allowed to happen.
Well, the global literature on water scarcity tells us in one sentence that when water scarcity becomes a pertinent factor, two things happen. The first thing that happens is that it heightens it's unevenly distributed between the haves and the have-nots. And the second thing that happens is that it magnifies or amplifies underlying tensions in society. So at the moment, there's a drilling bonanza in the Western Cape. There are hundreds of borehole drilling rigs drilling literally tens of balls per day, and this has just been declared by the national government to be illegal, and because under emergency circumstances they're all drilling into the same resource, and they cannot have a situation where the rich can now squander what is a national resource. The National Water Act of 1998 in any event has nationalised the resource, so the government does control it. Whether the government has the ability to literally control every borehole, one doesn't know. This comes down to a capacity issue, but this is very much an undercurrent that's coming to the surface. There also happens to be a big beer brewery down there that gets all its water from groundwater, and there has already been a lot of tension around that site because that brewery has made some of its water available to the public, and people have been collecting more water than they legally allowed to carry away, and there have been some squabbles and some fighting has broken out there already.
This is a terrible situation, and a situation that is not solvable unless, of course, there is a massive deluge pretty quick, and there's no great sign of that. I mean, you're in high summer there at the moment, and that's hot in Cape Town. I know the place well. That can be very, very hot. So what on earth is going to be done? This needs, as you say, somebody to step up to the plate and do something Churchillian, but they need to have done it yesterday.
Yes, I've just put out a piece. As a scientist, I'm very concerned about the fact that people listen to what I say, and I don't in any way want to drive panic or give any misinformation. But I think as a scientist, one has to be responsible as well. And when you know that things are potentially going to cause harm to human beings, I think you have to make your voice heard. So I put out a piece last week in the Cape Messenger that actually suggested that we are coming in for a bumpy landing, and we now need to assume a brace position, because in reality nothing that can be done now is going to make a significant enough impact on the water situation between now and day zero. Just for your listeners' insight, one of the unique things about the Western Cape is that it's one of the 6 winter rainfall areas in the world. So it's the same as Southern California, the same as parts of Chile, the same as Western Australia and Southern Australia, and of course the same as the Mediterranean area. So the winter rainfall areas are all under the similar kind of distress. In the case of the Western Cape or Cape Town area, it's a winter rainfall area, so the first possible rains are normally maybe in May, but typically in June. So one has to literally literally batten down the hatches until the first rains fall, hopefully before May. And that's why those areas are so critical, because the water is set to run out in the middle of April.
But that whole area of the Western Cape is a fantastic area. I know the area from Cape Town itself, which I know very well, and all the way out to beautiful Arniston, which is, basically the point where two oceans meet. It's a fabulous, fabulous area. Depends on tourism and depends on food and wine exports. What on earth is going to happen to those trades?
Well, I was on a panel discussion on one of our national TV stations the day before yesterday, and there was a spokesperson from Agri-SA, the agricultural interest group, and they are fairly wiped out already in the Western Cape. Something like 45% of the total national export from South Africa comes from the Western Cape. So we're talking about a substantial economic impact at national level. You must also appreciate that the agricultural industry, by virtue of the fact that it's in a winter rainfall area, has to store the water because the growing season is summer. So without storage capacity, you've effectively wiped out your agriculture. And a lot of the agriculture is high value wine, and it takes typically 7 years for a vine to come to maturity. So if you wipe out your vineyard right now, then you've got a 7-year crisis going forward. But the more important thing is that the agricultural sector employs thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and once those people are unable to receive a salary, this is what happens now when you start getting that migration that starts kicking in as a direct result of a crisis of this nature. And this is what I would like to think the emergency planners have planned in the planning, but by all indications, I don't think they have, because they've only got 200 water points across the city, and they haven't really thought through how, for example, elderly people in wheelchairs, maybe small children, this kind of thing, how these people can physically carry 25 litres of water, where they can park their motor cars, because we don't have public transport, of course, in South Africa of the same sophistication as you have in UK. So most people are going to have to drive to the water point, and then where they're going to park their motor cars. So there are many unintended consequences or unthought through details that I think are going to become apparent as this story breaks. This story is the very, very early phase of the news cycle in this particular one.
Say that again. Anthony Turton is that man's name. He's a water expert in South Africa. And all right, it's not Strictly Come Dancing, it's not Britain's Got Talent, but it's important, because a city on this planet, a big city full of people just like us, might be the first city anywhere to run out of water in a matter of weeks. And that hasn't been particularly on anyone's news agenda very much up here for this last week. And I'm wondering why that might have been, which is why we've done that. For a whole mess of reasons, not just the fact that they're going to run out of water, but imagine what happens when people, if it's not massively organized, and if maybe, security forces are not on the street and that kind of thing, people might fight over water. We hope they don't, and we don't want to create a worst case scenario here. There might be some miracle cure to this problem, and we understand that. People who work in agriculture, famous South African wine, you can see the shops festoon with it, the shelves, all the big supermarkets here, full of wine from Cape Town. I know those winelands. They won't be able to produce because there won't be water for the grapes, and there won't be water to keep the machinery going. And so people won't be able to work. Same with the flowers that they produce there and all of that lovely South African fruit. There are going to be big problems, and this is just beginning to dawn on the rest of us. And it may not be the first place to experience something like that. And I'm not sitting here crusading for the climate change case or anything like that, because a lot of that's above my pay grade, but I just think it's something that is worth considering. And you may well be hearing, after this, a little more about this. Who knows? But, at least I've started the ball rolling up here. This is the Unexplained at Talk Radio. We're going to be talking next about living off the grid. Stay here.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
A new kind of talk radio. We'll get you talking.
Top trade picks at TradePoint to kickstart 2018. Gonna do what? Contractor chest for just £30. Excludes VAT at 20%. Trade on.
TradePoint. Yes, you can. More specifically, you can in Jan. More specifically, you can get a car in Jan. More specifically, cars in the Fiat 500 range are yours from just £139 per month plus initial rental of £973. That's the lovely little Fiat 500, the spacious Fiat 500L, or the go-anywhere Fiat 500X. Offers end soon. More specifically, don't hang about. Personal contract hire offer available on Fiat 500 range until the 31st of March 2018. Initial rental and monthly payments will vary depending on version. 48-month term, 6,000 miles PA, subject to status, leases.
At Jet2 Holidays, we know all the things that make a great holiday, so we do all of them. Like having thousands of free child places, 22 kilograms of baggage included, and a choice of spacious family rooms for quality time together, all for just a £60 deposit. Book your next ABTA and ATOL protected holiday now and get £100 off per person. Jet2 Holidays. Package holidays you can trust, subject to availability and conditions.
Whatever you need from your next new car, Auto Trader will help you find the car that's right for you. Whether it's for the newfound hobby or more space for Charles and Robin. And if paying one is your thing, try our new way of searching. Simply pop in how much you want to pay per month, then check out a range of cars available to you. It's that easy with Auto Trader. Auto Trader.
I'm Jane.
Liking Sprohe. I have a big channel and reaching out to smaller channels. If you follow me, then I will give you a shout out when I go live.
Well, hey,
I will honor my word.
that sounds like a plan.
Last week, my commanding officer asked me to green light takeoff.
Heat sink.
Doesn't get much better than that. Make your spare time count with over 40 roles. Commit only 27 days a year. Search RAF Reserves.
Next hour, Nostradamus expert John Hogue is here. Predictions for 2018 from him. That'll raise you right round, I think. Final hour, Professor Arby Loeb returns with a lot of space talk. Some stuff that he would not have.
Heat sink.
He is some philosopher. He's space. He is now at Harvard University leading space scientists in the world. And it's very good. I mean, he mainly does kind of heavy reading, big newspapers and that kind of stuff. But he likes this show and likes to come on this show. So it's going to be the third hour tonight. Now, living off the grid, we've just been talking about what's going on in Cape Town and how by April, the beginning of, they may reach day zero, and that's when the water starts running out. Giving those people who need it most some water, hospitals and that kind of thing, and rationing it to everyone
Heat sink.
if it comes to pass. So, but nobody's got a magic plan by the sounds of it, so it sounds like it's going to happen. The first city in the world to run out of water. Which might actually play into what we're about to talk about. We're about to talk about living off the grid. In other words, surviving in a way that you don't need the involvement of the big utilities, companies, electricity companies, and all the rest of it. Making your own way. A man who's written 2 books about this. One's about to come out, one is out already. It's Gary Collins in the US. And he's written a book called Living Off the Grid. Let's get him on right now. Gary, thank you for waiting. We're slightly later than I said we would be, but thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, no problem, Howard. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Now, we've talked a lot about the possibility of there might be an asteroid impact one of these days. We hope not. They keep missing us, and that's good news. All kinds of things. Climate change has an impact. All of these things are making more and more people start to think about, if the power went out one of these days, if something bad happens, how will they cope? Myself. And that's one aspect, isn't it, of living off the grid, of being self-sustaining. Yeah?
Absolutely. It's about kind of having that ability to know that you will have the ability to live on your own. And I give a good example. Just 100 years ago, everyone was a farmer or knew a farmer. You know, my grandmother and grandfather lived through the Great Depression, and they said that was kind of living off the grid kind of back then. That's what almost everyone did who was not in a city setting. So we're not that far removed from living like that, a self-sustaining lifestyle. It's just in the last 100 years, we've gotten so far away from it. People go into panic mode if the power goes out.
Well, exactly. We're staring down the barrel of this situation in Cape Town. I know it's a long way away from London. It's a long way away. I know you're in California tonight. That's not where you live for part of the year, but it's a long way away from both of us. But it's the kind of thing that, for example, California might face, because California has the same sort of climate as Cape Town.
Yeah, and that's people don't realize, because they see California and they see the commercials as this, beautiful ocean views, and California is a desert. I mean, a majority of the state is desert. So, as the aquifers start to get drained and the water tables and going with droughts, absolutely. That was why in my property, I explained in the book, the first thing I did was make sure I had access to water. Without water on a property, you're dead in the water. I mean, you got two choices: haul it, or you're camping. You're dry camping, and you're not going to be living there, more than likely. Those are your only options. So I explained that when you're looking to find a property, your first priority should be looking for water, or how you're going to access water.
Is it possible, though, in a sophisticated country like this one, where people are used to having everything, literally here's another analogy to do with water.
Hello.
A bit of symbolism to do with water. Everybody's used to having everything on tap. It's really easy now just to get everything delivered right to you. If a situation arose where people really did have to make their own way, find their own sources, do their own thing, maybe Kim Jong-un fires the missile that takes out part of this country or another country, and people have to start making their own way. Are you saying that even the average person who's lived a fairly comfortable life like I have and most of us have could actually do these things?
Well, you could if you prepared for it. If you had to kind of go from 0 to 100 and kind of do it as after the event happened. I've seen statistics that in 6 months, if something like that happened, a major nuclear detonation or an EMP, basically half the population of the world would be wiped out in 6 months, because people just don't know how to survive on their own. Could you do it after the fact?
System jump.
Yeah, but I think it would be very, very difficult, and I think that's why the prepper, survivalist, self-reliance, homesteading movement is kind of forefront again, and minimalizing, living a simpler life without relying upon all these things that we're used to every day having access to. The thing about living off the grid, I think that's a huge misconception, though, is today with the technology we have and the way things work and the building materials, you can live a very normal life off the grid, and you don't even know it. The power goes out around me because we have storms up where I live in Washington State, and I can see all the lights are out below me on the lake and everything below. And that's the only time I know that the power's on, because nothing stops for me. Everything runs, don't get me wrong, solar technology can get a little finicky with your inverter and stuff. Sometimes stuff will go down, but I have a backup generator too, so I just plug in my generator and I don't miss a beat. And I've stored gas, and so I can get away for quite a while. But I would say for the average person living in modern society or more urban areas, I would say it would be pretty difficult if something major happens for them to survive and be able to go to kind of a off-the-grid, self-sustaining lifestyle. Let's face it, I just don't think most people have the skills. I mean, most people don't even know where their food comes from, let alone how to get it.
And that's a bit of a worry. We've only got about a minute or so in this segment. We're coming up for news. We'll come back to you after it, Gary Collins. But you didn't do this because you necessarily wanted to, did you? The recession forced this on you.
A little bit. It was kind of a multitude of things. I'd been working for the federal government for half my life. Downturn in the economy, left the government, had always wanted to do it. I grew up very rural. I grew up in a very small town in the middle of nowhere, so it wasn't too far outside of what I'd grown up with. But yeah, it was kind of everything coming together and having to reevaluate my life and how I was living, because I was living like everyone else, up to my neck in debt, not a good plan, and really didn't know which direction to go. And I kind of sat down and said, you got to fix this problem, and that's kind of what I did.
So you bought a piece of land and you built something on it and you became self-sustaining. Sounds really easy. I know it wasn't.
No, it's not easy. And if you talk to people who have done it, on average, it takes you 3 to 5 years to kind of go through the whole project and get it done to where it's livable and it's working how you want it to work. It's a raw land. I mean, you're out in the sticks. It's never ending. It's just like I said, farmers growing. The farmers 100 years ago, they worked their land until the day they died.
And of course, you've got to be sure your health holds out, haven't you?
that is very important. And actually, I wrote 3 health books before that on primal living. So I talk about health as kind of the key to everything. If you don't have your health and you want to live off grid or live, a more self-sustaining lifestyle, you got to get your health in order first.
All right, Gary Collins, we'll talk some more after the news here at Talk Radio. We're talking about living off the grid. And I want to talk particularly with Gary after the news here at Talk Radio about those people who call themselves preppers. We heard about homesteaders, by the way. We'll explain what that means to us. A uniquely American kind of thing. But we'll talk about the preppers, those who are making preparations right now, and I know some of them are in this country, for whatever may happen. Perhaps assuming that the economy may go belly up and that power companies won't be able to do what they do. Making preparations, we'll talk about that coming next here.
Talk Radio. Dial up some dialogue.
Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
5 weeks ago, 19 men attacked our country. We'll be the first to fight back.
From the producer of Black Hawk Down.
No reinforcements, no extraction. We're on our own.
I think I hit launch.
Based on the declassified true story of the horse soldiers.
Chances are we are not going to make it out of this one. We're with horsemen against tanks. Strap in tight!
Chris Hemsworth, 12 Strong, in cinemas January 26th.
The new Jaguar E-Pace is finally here. Start the ignition, revel in its roar, and savor the performance of the most exciting compact SUV.
Sorry, SUV, is that right?
Yes, Mark, it's a compact SUV. Please, continue.
Interesting. The new Jaguar E-Pace. It's not just an SUV, it's a Jaguar. Search E-Pace for more details. Jaguar, the art of performance.
The Truth Project is part of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. Getting a better picture of the past will build a safer place for children in the future. Visit truthproject.org.uk.
At Jet2 Holidays, we love a good number. We even have one in our name. So here are a few for you. 0. We have no credit card fees. 467 amazing holiday resorts to choose from. 3,700 spectacular hotels in beach and city locations. And 7.7 million. That's how many people have holidayed with us. Jet2 Holidays. Package holidays you can trust. ABTA and ATO protected.
Before you get car finance, check with us. If you want to save some money, check with us. Car finance 24/7. Car finance 24/7. Car finance 24/7. Check with us.
Find now at carfinance247.co.uk for rates from 7% APR. We're a broker regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, represented at 27.4% APR. All circumstances considered.
Car finance 24/7. Car finance 24/7. Get your finance first and then you're good to go.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
A radio star is born.
You're going to love
Talk Radio. Talk Radio.
From the Sky News Centre at 11, UKIP's ruling committee has unanimously backed a vote of no confidence in leader Henry Bolton. He's faced calls to step down after it emerged his ex-girlfriend sent racist texts to a friend while they were in a relationship. An emergency general meeting of the party will now be held to allow members to decide whether to back or reject the vote. Speaking earlier, Mr Bolton insisted he won't quit and would have to be forced out. He also claimed there's lots of support for him.
I'm getting letters from branch chairmen, from regional chairmen across the country saying, do not go. You leave, the party is dead.
Police say an 8-year-old girl has been stabbed to death near Warsaw and a 54-year-old man's been arrested. He's in a critical condition in hospital with stab wounds to the stomach. It's emerged gunmen in Kabul killed more than 30 people when they stormed a luxury hotel. The attackers in army uniforms battled Afghan special forces for hours. 14 of those killed are known to have been foreigners. Thousands of people have gathered at a church in Limerick to pay tribute to Cranley's frontman, Denise Rogan. The Irish singer's body is lying in public at St Joseph's after she was found dead in London on Monday. A message by her coffin says the song has ended, but the memories linger on. This man is among those who've queued up to pay his respects.
She was a phenomenal talent, you know, and just I guess the Cranberries were a huge band as well, and she was a huge singer and just a very decent and normal person, a very humble person, and a big star.
Moving on to sport and football, Watford have appointed former Malaga manager Javi Garcia as their new boss. He signed an 18-month contract to succeed Marco Silva, who was sacked this morning in the only Premier League game of the day. Southampton and Tottenham drew 1-1. And Hearts reward for a 1-0 win over Hibs in the Scottish Cup 5th round tie against Alton or St Johnstone. Over Celtic face a Glasgow derby at Home Park. That's the latest. I'm Barry.
The following program contains graphic audio images of the supernatural and scenarios depicting paranormal activity that some listeners may find disturbing. Views expressed in the program are solely those of the presenter and do not in any way reflect the opinions, beliefs, or policies of Talk Radio.
Untwist the lid on Talk Radio's specimen jar of the psychic, the supernatural, and the simply unexplainable. The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
As they say on other broadcasters, still to come this hour, we're going to be talking about Nostradamus and 2018. Yes, Nostradamus did have something to say about this year. We'll find out what it is. With John Hogue, who's been on this show before and who you liked. So he's about 10 minutes or so away from now. And in the next hour, we're going to talk space with Professor Avi Loeb, one of the world's most famous space scientists. Will be exclusively right here on the Unexplained. But right now, back to Gary Collins, who's in California tonight, but built himself his own self-sustaining home in Washington State. Which is kind of up north and west in the United States. Gary, how challenging was it when you decided to do that, or when circumstances forced you to do it? I mean, what was the first thing you thought when you began to plan for this?
Well, it was more about freedom to me. It was not getting stuck. I got stuck in the real estate bubble of California, of the country, U.S., and also world as well, but mainly in the U.S., and got caught in a house that was basically turned into an anchor around my leg. And I realized I do not want to go through this again. I'd been pretty successful with real estate prior to that, had owned several properties. This is actually the third house I've had built. This is the first one where I've actually done a lot of building myself. But I'm pretty handy. I've owned apartments and stuff like that. So it wasn't like a huge dive off a cliff. But it was very challenging. One of the most challenging things today here is finding good buildable land with access to water. It took me about, I think I started this search 5 years prior, maybe even longer, maybe even 7, before I finally bought the land. So it took several years of kind of exploring, figuring out where I wanted to live, find out what I could afford. But that was kind of it. It was just the housing market. Just hit me, just sideswiped me.
I read in your book the land cost you, it's astonishing from our point of view over here in Europe, but the land cost you $23,000, is that right?
I think I have that wrong. I actually went and looked at my deed recently, and I think it was $22,000.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So what does that impact these days in pounds? That's about £17,000 or thereabouts for the land. Now we're talking about the United States and we're talking about a remote place. But that's a good deal. But then you've got to start putting things on it. And you've got to start planning for water that's not going to run out and is not going to poison me, and a power source and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, when you buy the land, you kind of do it without any guarantees, especially on the water side. I had the drill well. The well cost more than the land in the end, because I was at the top. I'm at the top of a mountain, and I had to drill 510 feet. To get to a good source of water.
510 feet.
That's a deep well. That's a fairly deep well. It's not the deepest. I've met some people at deeper ones. I've actually talked to people who've gone to like 800-900 feet.
Now, the really stupid question: how did you know that there was water there and it was water you could drink?
Well, Washington is the kind of nickname for is the land of the lakes. There's lakes everywhere in Washington, so I was surrounded by lakes. And just because I was up above, I mean, you could see water everywhere. So you know it's there. You know the water table's there. And what they do, too, is the drilling company comes in. I picked one of the bigger ones. They cost more, but they had a lot more experience drilling deeper wells and more remote wells.
Right. So that was one thing you couldn't do for yourself.
Oh, God. You can. Don't get me wrong. I know people have dug their own wells. Drill. Well, no, it actually depends where the water table is. That's how they used to do it back 100, 200 years ago. I mean, they would just go dig a hole, let it fill up, and then they would encase it, and that was your well. You know those old wells with the bucket? Mm-hmm. Those were hand dug.
No, I'm sort of getting mental images here. This is going to date me of the Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Yeah, it's kind of that lifestyle in a way. But like I said, things are the technology has come so far that I actually had it witched as well. which is dowsing rods, you know, where they cross.
There he
I did that
is.
as well, and the guy who did it, he came up, he charged me $50, and he was dead on. Where he said
There
it,
he is.
oh yeah, and then the drill.
Oh,
the
I'm
drilling
having
guy
him.
came up after him, and he'd already witched it, and the drilling guy knew him. They knew each other, and he kind of went, "Oh heck, I didn't know you were coming up here." And he goes, "Oh yeah, through a friend of a friend. You know, they said come on up here." And he comes up and he goes, he didn't know where the guy had pointed to yet. We hadn't told him where.
Right, so it wasn't a setup for $50.
It wasn't a setup. No, he had no clue.
That's pretty damned impressive. Okay, so you get the water, you drill the 510 feet.
Come on, you
How much
bastard.
did that cost, the drilling?
With the casing, drilling, and the water pump, because you need you're off grid, so you need a different kind of water pump for it that will run AC/DC. And that was a total of right around and that was testing everything to make sure the water was clean. Everything was about $25,000.
Right. Okay. So it's a doable kind of thing. So you get the water. What about power? Do you have to use solar power? Presumably you do.
I do. See, I'm in a different part of Washington. Most people think of Seattle. I'm on the other side of the state, up by Canada, and half my town that I live in is half in Idaho and half of it's in Washington. So we get a lot more sunlight than the Pacific Northwest.
All right, but the sun doesn't shine 24/7, so when you are generating power with the sun, even if you get lots of sunshine, you're going to have to store your energy, aren't you?
Yeah, you have to get batteries, and your battery backup is fairly expensive. Those batteries are not cheap. I think my batteries are roughly around $2,400 for just the batteries, and you get 10 years out of them if you treat them nicely. And then they'll last. I've been testing them without any sunlight. I'll get about 3 to 4 days out of them. So, but I have a generator. So once they start draining down, I plug it into my inverter, and then I can charge the batteries through the generator.
Right. So we have to say, for those who don't know these things, and I've only just found this out, the inverter is the thing that you can have DC power batteries, and you plug the inverter in, and it will turn it into AC, alternating current, so you can put the TV on it and all the rest of it.
Correct. So that inverter, your batteries run separately. So when you're storing it over, you're storing it as DC power. When it comes back through, it runs back through the inverter, inverts it to AC back to the house. And so it's a little tricky, too, because battery power works a little bit differently than coming off your solar panels and your sun power being inverted. I found that out this year. I don't have a very big system. It only cost about $15,000 to get it installed. I have about 1.8 kilowatts of power. So, but it runs everything. I run all my power tools.
Oh, so it's good enough to run power tools. That's good. So you've got the water, you've got the electricity. You are building somewhere. I mean, is it a log cabin? I should have asked you.
No, I'm using a product called FAS, which is made out
What's
of
it called?
Oregon. It's called FAS, FASWLL. And there's a couple other companies that make it in the U.S. Basically, they call it it's like a Lego, but it's made out of wood chip and concrete. So it has a much better.
Stuff. Yeah. It's good insulation. It's pretty tough and it's cheap.
It's not expensive. It's not that bad. It's more expensive than standard, cinder blocks, but not much. It's not much, and you can do it yourself. I'd never used it. I actually had a guy do it because I'd never used the product before.
And did you design?
But I could easily do it.
Did you design the place yourself, or did you get an architect?
I had all the plans, and then I had an architect draw up what I'd pulled together, and told him what I wanted, and we went from there. It's about 1,100 square foot with a loft. It's a 2-story, so it's a little bigger. Originally, I was going to be about 550 to 600 square foot, but I only have one building site on the property that's really doable. So I figured I better build bigger because that's it. I get one shot. So I better build it a little bit bigger than I intended. But I power it, no problem. I mean, I have a refrigerator, stove. It's a normal house. If you walked in there, you would not know it's an off-the-grid running off solar power. You would have no idea.
It's great. Now look, if some cataclysm happened, and I mean, maybe there's a thing they talk about called the kill shot from the sun, which is one of those things, a pulse from the sun that takes down power grids. It's actually happened to a smaller extent on Earth and actually taken out, I think a Canadian city was taken down by something like this because the transformers are affected in the power grid and they're all assuming something bigger than what happened all those years ago in Canada. happened and America, large portions of it are left without power, and maybe then the water, they can't get the water pumped, and it starts being a little bit tricky. Does this mean that in your little place in Washington State, your big place in Washington State with your view of the lake, that everything just keeps on running in a hunky-dory way?
It should. I'm not sure about how a big solar flare would affect the electronics, because the newer inverters and the way they work, there's a lot of electronics in them.
So you haven't got it all covered in tin foil or whatever you need to protect it. Aluminum foil, as you call it.
But worst case is you would just have to convert over to DC. Your appliances and stuff wouldn't work. It'd be a little tricky, but you could go get a cheap inverter somewhere or have a backup and you could use it.
Now listen,
it would be
This show's friend Mal in Belfast, who's a regular listener. Mal, nice to know that you're there, makes a very, very good point. I was going to get round to talking about security, but let's do it right now because of what Mal says. He says this is all well and good, but in America with so many guns, what chance have you got really when, if something bad happens, people all go looking for shelter, you've got it, they've got guns, they're going to take it off you. Unless, of course, you've got fantastic security, and I'm not sure what security would be completely foolproof.
I don't think there is a foolproof security. I mean, people who bought those silos in, I believe it was Wyoming, and set up a community underground, yeah, they'd probably be safe. My attitude is, I was in the military and federal law enforcement for most of my life. I'm a pretty good shot. But if it comes down to that, not to be, put it on a negative light, but all I need is one bullet. If it turns that bad, why would I want to be around?
So right, okay, so you would, that's a road that I didn't think we were going down. So you are prepared ultimately to defend your property, and if push comes to shove, then you would exit yourself.
Yeah, because a lot of people ask me that, and it looks great on TV. Well, the realistic though, because I've told people, if you can't feed your kids, you're eating your animals. People are trying to kill you. They're trying to overthrow your property, get in there. Wow, I mean, what would be the quality of life? I mean, what would you have? You'd be so stressed out.
Heat sink.
It's a hell of a thought, and I realise you have to go there.
Shield cell.
You have to think about security. You have to realise there are limits to security. But look, on the upside, most of the time when you're there, it must be absolutely blissful because you're there in a beautiful
shield cell. Heat sink.
Which are wonderful, appealing things. Is it not?
It can be, but I'm not too far from town. I'm about 20 minutes from town. And it's a little small town. I'm about 35, 40 minutes from a city. So it's not bad. I picked purposefully. I looked at some very remote properties, and I may actually build a small cabin on a very remote place in another state. I'm starting to think about as a backup plan. But having that human interaction, you got to have something. You start to get up there, and you get a little goofy if you've been alone for a week or so and you haven't had any contact.
Okay, so you're handy for town. That means that you're not rubbing when you're on the cruise, going into town and buying groceries.
I do. I haven't built the greenhouses yet.
Is that in the plan? Is that in?
It is, and unfortunately too for me, the way it works, I leave at the peak right before hunting season. So deer and elk season usually is right around the time I leave. Because the one thing about remote properties you have to realize too is some people hunker down. I chose not to. I run a business, so I travel around. I do conferences and workshops with people. So I have to be a little more mobile.
Right. So in other words, you're not there all the time, and those who are there all the time, they're
Yeah, well, yeah, and I do hunt. I don't usually hunt birds, but the thing for, I go fishing, and I'm gonna grow my own stuff. I've done it in the past in other properties. It's one of those, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
That is straight from Dale Carnegie, the famous Dale Carnegie. I once met, it's gonna go. I once met the once president self-improvement organization. He said, Howard, most important thing is, in life, how do you eat an elephant? And I said, I don't know, how do you eat an elephant? presumably with a big knife and fork. He said, no, in bite-sized pieces. Such an approach to life, I think, is very good. Now, listen, we've only got seconds. You've got a second book coming out, and that's all about self-sufficiency in a camper van.
Yeah, I live part of the year in a RV travel trailer. So when it gets snowy, gets really cold there, because I can't access the property. It snows in. I'd have to access it with snowmobile and park my car a mile, 2 miles down the road, and I'm getting old. I don't deal with that. So I've been living this way for about 4 or 5 years now. So I have a travel trailer. I tow it around, and if I get sick of a place, I just go somewhere else, and I run my business remotely. And yeah, so I'm gonna write a.
That is, you know, when the day comes when I say, right, enough of all this radio stuff, I want to be completely self-sufficient. I'm going to build my own studio in a trailer, and you know, the hell to the lot of them. I will be reading your book and possibly following its guidelines. If people want to read about you, Gary Collins, where do they go?
All my books are on Amazon and iTunes. They're on every major distributor worldwide, and also my website is primalpowermethod.com.
primalpowermethod.com. Gary Collins, thank you very much, and more power to your generators.
Thank you, Howard.
Take care. Gary Collins, living off the grid, and all those people in the US. All right, it's maybe more of an American thing than a UK thing, but there are people who do it here, and if you do it here, I would love to hear from you. Coming next, we're going to talk about Nostradamus, the great seer, who is frequently referred to by those who perhaps don't know much about Nostradamus. Somebody who does is John Hogue. We're going to talk about what Nostradamus makes of 2018. Coming next on The Unexplained at Talk Radio.
Talk Radio. Listen, phone, talk.
Talk Radio.
We'll get you talking.
Nothing to see here. Just a regular retriever eating his food, doing his thing while you are doing yours. Not reading the bin. And no little surprises left on the floor. What a good boy. Nothing to see here means nothing to worry about. With the new High-View Smart Indoor Camera, you can check on your home from your phone wherever you are. Search Hive to discover more. Hive. Let's get living. Hive services require broadband and Wi-Fi. Terms apply.
Whatever you need from your next new car, Auto Trader will help you find the car that's right for you. Whether it's for a newfound hobby or more space for Charles and Bobby. And if paying monthly is your thing, try our new way of searching. Simply pop in how much you want to pay per month, then check out a range of cars available to you. It's that easy with Auto Trader. Auto Trader Limited is a credit broker, not a lender. Terms apply.
At Jet2 Holidays, we love a good number. We even have one in our name. So here are a few for you. 0. We have no credit card fees. 467 amazing holiday resorts to choose from. 3,700 spectacular hotels in beach and city locations. And 7.7 million. That's how many people have holidayed with us. Jet2 Holidays. Package holidays you can trust. ABTA and ATOL protected.
Mouth Ulcer Diaries, Chapter 1, The Peril of Lady Scarlet.
Oh gosh, this mouth ulcer pain is just the worst!
Luckily, Bongella's on hand to offer some assistance. 3 minutes later...
Oh, thank you, Bongella. You're my hero.
Until the next adventure, Bongella. Fight mouth ulcers in 3 minutes. Always read the label. Available at most boot stores, subject to availability.
Where do you charge an electric car?
How quickly can I do it?
How far can you go on one charge?
How much can I save?
Can I charge it at home?
Do I need a house with a drive? Can you get an electric shock off them?
If I plug in on mobile phone, will the car's battery run out?
Can they go in car washes?
Got questions about owning an electric car? Get the answers at goultralow.com.
The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
John Hogue was on this show about 4 or 5 months ago, and we had a conversation, and I said we're going to do more of this. John Hogue is an expert on Nostradamus, but brings the prophecies of Nostradamus up to date. His biography says that he writes on the occult, parapsychology, mysticism, and prophecy. He is a world authority on Nostradamus, best-selling author of numerous books, including Nostradamus, The Complete Prophecies, and Nostradamus, The New Millennium, which we are in. That is a kind of boiled-down version of your story, John Hogue. Nice to have you back on the show.
Great to be back on, Howard.
For those who are new to you and new to this, and maybe have never heard of Nostradamus, or have only ever heard him just referred to as some kind of seer or prophet, who was Nostradamus? What did he do?
He was born in 1503 and died in 1566 in the high Renaissance period in France. He was born in Provence. And if he had not left a legacy of prophecies in almanacs and then later a magnum opus, Les Prophéties, the prophecies, that looked at the future of history of the world beyond the year 3797 AD. If he had not done any of that, he would have been remembered and regarded well for his almost single-handed fighting against the plague, which had hit Provence in 1540s. And in the case of Aix-en-Provence, the capital of Provence, he almost single-handedly, all the other doctors had fled or died, helped the people get through 9 months of bubonic plague.
Right, so he was a remarkable, able guy, but how did the prophecy and the seeing come into it?
It was he said it was a family gift that would die with him, would not go to his descendants. And so it was always a part of his life. There's some speculation. I wrote probably the first actual full-body biography on Nostradamus in 4.5 centuries called Nostradamus, A Life and Myth, where I saw all this material for his very rich life, but never understood why nobody, all these centuries, had actually written a full-scale, like 120, 130,000 word biography. And in the middle of it, I discovered why. It's very hard to separate the factual man from the myth that has surrounded him. So I tried, and one of the things that seems to have happened is that he was very interested in always in astrology, and that a way you could be a respectable person and be involved in astrology was to be a doctor, because astrology was accepted since ancient Roman times and in the Renaissance, because people were reviving a lot of the virtues of Roman times. It was a way for you to be in the mainstream without being under suspicion. He was born of a recently Christianized Jewish family, just a few years before he was born. And he also had a fascination with plants and herbs. Indeed, in his travels extensively around France and possibly into Spain, Italy, and a little bit into Germany, he had met up with one of the kind of proto-scientists, pre-botany scientists, Jules Caesar Scaliger. And they became very good friends when he was living in Agen in southwest France. And there was a tragedy that happened. I've kind of tracked down that they thought it was a bubonic plague that carried off his first attempt at having a marriage. His wife and 2 children were both carried off by it. But I came across reports that showed that both him and Scaliger were threatening to leave the town of Agen if something wasn't done with the foul humors that was fuming out of the marshlands around that region. Of course, people thought that that's what carried plague in the 1500s. I think the reason why he couldn't handle curing it was malaria. And everything was called a plague in those days.
And they wouldn't have known the difference, would they?
And the book is available in Amazon.co.uk.
All right, how did he become a kind of go-to guy, though, for prophecy? I get the feeling that if Nostradamus was around today, he would probably be writing astrology columns for newspapers.
Yeah, well, or being on radio shows.
Like this one, okay.
Yes. Well, what happened is he finally ended his travels, married again, was independently wealthy, and then married a wealthy widow, possibly the wife of one of his patients died. And he started building another family. They built a 3rd floor on this house that still exists as a museum in Salon, Provence. And he started to collect all of his magical gear and got seriously deep into theurgy. I mean, he tried all kinds of things, and he was also quite unusual in that he would blend traditions together. I mean, there are people out there who've done whole documentaries and books about Nostradamus possibly being involved with one esoteric group here, one as the Templars there, and he didn't have the psychology to be that way, because he would have broken all the rules, because he would have blended a little this, a little that. I mean, we know from the quotes in his journals and writings is that he used a book of theurgy that was translated into Latin.
And when you say theurgy, what are you meaning by that?
That theurgy is, in modern terms, is being a medium to use spirits of different planes, high and low, to help you hear, see, and smell the future.
So he wasn't just an astrologer, he was a lot more than that.
He was a Renaissance man. I mean, he was also a successful cosmetic manufacturer. He has many cookbooks that have survived the centuries that are still, you can find them in France. He did a lot of things. In fact, the time that he dedicated to prophecy was pretty short in his 62 years of life. What made him famous is that he started writing his history of the future because of the concern he had over something he kept seeing, which he wrote about, called In the Year of France and the One-Eyed King. And he seemed to understand and even write about the possibility of Henry II, the King of France, who was married to Catherine de Medici, possibly dying in a jousting tournament accident, which would cause his children to be too young for they're too much deep in their minority to be kings, and would trigger the years of revolution, religious civil war that racked France for the next 40 years. And he described it in his first 3 volumes of a planned 10-volume work that contains 100 4-line verses called quatrains that are in rhyme, and a very strange style of poetic writing, which he openly said, I did this kind of poetic fire and fury to kind of mask things, because if people with their delicate sensitivities about their hopes about what the future of religion and the kingdom and all, if they saw what was really going to happen, they would damn their own future.
Right, so he shielded the real content of these things, or he put them in a riddling kind of form. He made it less penetrable than it might be, because if he wrote it in plain text, then that would put him, with some people, at risk, wouldn't it?
Well, and even worse, is a deeper thing, a deeper insight. And I think it's because he actually predicted that he would reuse as propaganda. Some of the prophecies point to how the Germans would use him as a foil for Adolf Hitler, who he called Hister, of the Crooked Cross, the captain of Greater Germany. Greater Germany was the official, Der Großdeutsches Reich was the official political title for the Third Reich.
But leaving all of that aside, we say, foresaw that, and this person called Hister, who we later knew as being the terrible despot that he was, Adolf Hitler, he predicted.
Howard, my point, I haven't finished my point. The point is that why then would he do it, not just for that, not just for seeing the future, but let's say he was clear enough about Saddam Hussein that Saddam Hussein, like Hitler's people, read his work and said, oh, well, I won't invade Kuwait until I am a nuclear power. And then who's going to be responsible for that? If Operation Desert Storm ends up becoming a regional nuclear war with millions dying, Nostradamus would be responsible for that. So there's a reason also to hide the prophecies for several reasons. One, all the people who are just merely entertained by it will soon leave, so those people will go. People with evil intent would not easily find solutions to their problem. And Germans on the German side of the propaganda war were desperate to find answers in the prophecies that showed Hitler would win. And one of them got so worked up about it that he had a nervous breakdown and was sent to Bergen-Belsen to die of typhus.
Right, and so what did the prophecy say about Hister? The prophecy presumably was correct and said that he would come to a sticky end.
Well, it said that he would be encased in an iron cage underground, and no one would completely know what happened to him. And what's intriguing about that is you go, well, the Führer bunker was a big cement 2-3-story thing underneath the capital of Berlin. But if you see when it was being under construction, it looked, with all the rebar before they poured the cement, it looked like this huge cage. And one can then think that maybe when the spirits showed Nostradamus, when he made his magic circle and sat in protection and then put the triangle to the right outside the circle to conjure up the spirit of Theurgy, that what the spirit told him and showed him in shadowy images, he said, was possibly the cage being constructed that would later be the Führer bunker.
Okay, well, I mean, that is an interpretation.
Well, everything is.
Well, yeah, everything in life is, of course it is. But this is. I mean, it's not just you making that interpretation. Other people down the years have made that interpretation.
Well, the thing is, with any interpretation, the thing that has merit in the prophecy field is if you make an interpretation and then write it down, and then it happens. There have been many people who look at Nostradamus from hindsight, which is completely useless. And unfortunately, because most of us love what Nostradamus had to say after the fact, he has become the most popular, and I would add, the most unsuccessful prophet in history, because he has not, as he said he tried to do, guide us around where the history of the future can incline to better future.
John Hogue, we have to park it there for just a moment and come back to you because we have some commercials to run here at Talk Radio across the UK. We're talking with John Hogue. We've been talking about Nostradamus and why this guy was different and why some down the centuries have viewed him as being important, as being somebody who could predict things like the outcome of the Second World War. But John Hogue, who we've got on here, has also applied Nostradamus's teachings, if you want to call them that, to this year of 2018 and come out with a set of predictions, I guess you could call them, based on the work of Nostradamus. Now, we're not saying these things are going to happen. They're just interesting to hear. And if they do transpire, then that's pretty damn remarkable, don't you think? More from John Hogue coming right up here.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
Jamie East on Talk Radio. Irreverent afternoon entertainment and essential listening on the UK's premier forum of mind-expanding free speech.
Join me, Jamie East. We'll have guests, we'll have phone-ins. Just come to Jamie.
Afternoons with Jamie East. Tomorrow afternoon from 1 on Talk Radio.
The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
John Hogue, expert on Nostradamus, has written many books about him. Also knows a fair amount about the occult, parapsychology, mysticism and prophecy, which is what we're talking about tonight. How did you come to the idea of applying the works of Nostradamus to a year like the one we're staring down the barrel of now, 2018?
Well, Nostradamus structures a lot of his prophecies according to astrological cycles, so one of the first ways to enter in is to see if there's some significant astrological configuration that seems to parallel current trends, and then you look to see what that might be. In the process of doing that, one has to have a very neutral position politically and religiously, and take a look at all of this without bringing in your own identity baggage with it. And so there are some things, and this book, which we're previewing because it'll be released next weekend, is my usual thing of doing 10 significant predictions for the coming year. The other thing I've got to qualify, too, is not just with Nostradamus. I have been making forecasts since 1968 and documenting my work. So I come to this not just as somebody who studies it, but somebody who is also a part of some of the mysteries that are surrounding this kind of work.
All right, now I know that you've discussed on American radio the 10 prophecies of 2018 that you've come out with. We won't have time because of our time constraints here to go through all of them. So if you don't mind, I'm going to cherry pick some of them here. The first one is this will be the year of acceleration. Now, there is a theory in space, and it was first put by Art Bell, the man who in America did a program very much like this one on a much bigger scale across the United States and many other places, and wrote a book called The Quickening, which basically says that if you think that time is moving faster and the years are passing by more quickly than they did, in fact they are. Is that what this is? 2018, the year of acceleration?
Well, it's already been on. I did shows with Art Bell for about 19 years when he was doing Coast to Coast, and since do it with George Noory, who's taken over. And we often talked about this throughout the 1990s into the early 21st century. And the acceleration is going to have another uptick in this period. It's really a time where, oddly enough, whether he's aware of it or not, the new president of the United States is a catalyst for profound change all over the world. Now, change can be good and bad, but definitely we can see that things are being moved. I mean, on one hand, he's, and that is one of the key things that's going on. It's accelerating things that have got to give.
When you say it's accelerating, things have got to give, what exactly? You mean the pace of events?
The pace of events, the build-up of the speed of, which is partially caused by our increased technology, and also the enhancement of artificial intelligence, or what I would rather call artificial stupidity, and the point that the world is now becoming more interconnected. People are enhancing their intellectual distractions deeper and deeper into artificial enhancement of their own minds, their thinking. They're always looking in their phones.
We are beginning to harmonize with technology. I think we can agree with that. But how is that acceleration? That's just a fact, isn't it?
It is just a fact. It is happening, and it often happens at the end of great ages, and we are in the end of great age and the beginning of a new age. The Piscean age, which has been focused on centralization of religion, politics, economics, power grids, is now going to be decentralized by the onset of the new era that we're entering astrologically, the grand month called Aquarius, 20 centuries. And what that means is people are, you see the hints of this in the rise of cryptocurrency and blockchain, person-to-person transactions, which, taken to its ultimate, could see in a few decades the no longer a need for countries, no longer a need for nation centralized identities.
All right, so this is kind of in a way globalization. Just talk to me quickly.
Well, actually, it's localization going globally. That's paradoxical.
All right, okay. Talk to me about how you were able to derive that conclusion. Then, what is it you saw, and in whose work did you see that? You see what I'm saying?
Well, the work is mine, my own intuition. A work that I've helped by studying prophetic traditions of the world for over 30 years. The other part of that work is to have a knack for looking at what's going on all around the world without a nationalistic or religious identity in the way filtering it. I achieved that, I contend, through being a practitioner of the science of self-observation, meditation. And that is my main key. In the case of doing, if I study all the different trends, then I go into a space where I get out of my own way, and I'm
just get out of your own way.
You say it again. You didn't get through.
No, you said you get into a space where you get out of your own way. In other words, you meditate yourself into a place where you think you see what's going to happen in the future.
Well, first off, your question is by itself something that will take you out of the problem. The problem is you have to go to a place where you do not, there's nothing to do. You see, the mind is, and the outside-facing mind is always into doing. You do misery, you do meditation, you do, and everything that you say or do gets you into the tangle of appearances of identity. And when you do that, you are stepping away from that which can have the intuition, the witnessing consciousness inside you. So the thing to do is, every thought and statement you're making, Howard, is like throwing a rock into a little pond where when it was undisturbed, the moon had only one reflection of its illusion in the sky, the full moon. But when we think we're throwing rocks into the pond, and then suddenly that moon is many little fragments of confusion and stuff. And it's what Mayor Baba used to call the manyness of illusion, that the world is now reaching to a peak. In a way, to answer your other question, the quickening is the quickening of the mind and its outwardness into the manyness of illusion, which he said would reach a crisis in our time, and then in 700 years we would develop a paradise on Earth that with only one illusion, like the water gets stiller and still. The mind calms down, the emotions calm down, and then the reflection of things is more perfect. And it's from that stage...
For people who don't quite understand all of this, and I have to say you're beginning to lose me just a little bit, John, how would you boil it down into a sentence?
You want it in your mind, you want to understand, I understand in your intellect, but what I'm telling you is it's like you want it to be black and white, and I'm talking color.
All right. Let's go to your 8th prophecy then.
You have to experience it. I just simply close on that because it's an important point you make. What I'm trying to say and indicate can only be indicated by words because it's higher than words, deeper than words. So it has to be taken as a hypothesis, and then you have to kind of find your own way to calm yourself down and have the experience.
Okay, I want to go, because we're running out of time, to the 8th prophecy, and some of this actually is happening, but then maybe by looking at temperature records and that kind of thing, and just by seeing the way that the world's climate and weather is going, you could have assumed this anyway. But you say that 2018 is going to be the year of storms and record temperatures.
Yes, and just so you all know, since you're new to my work, everything I've said and a lot of things I've done has been published and dated. So there were years before things started to heat up. In fact, I have been following the dangers of climate change since 1973 and writing about it since 1983. And it has... so when I see things and say these things happen, a lot of the things I've been talking about, I've talked about 25 years before they started happening. So just to get a point of that, we are now in another shift. It happened in 2010, and I said we would end up in a series of the hottest years. I call it a temperature tsunami, where the records just rise suddenly into record-breaking territory and pretty much stay there like a flood coming into Tohoku during the Great...
But of course, a lot of scientists have been saying these things too, John, haven't they? So, it's...
Yes, but I've been saying these things...
Since, as you say, since 1973.
You don't know my work. So it would be good if you read some of my books from 20 years ago. They're there. And that's all I can say to your audience. All right.
John,
it's easy to brush that off if you haven't read anything.
Okay. Time is always the enemy on a show like this. If people want to make their own decision about what they've heard, where do they go? What's your website?
You go to hogueprophecy.com. That's HOGUEPROPHECY.com. And if you just go to amazon.co.uk and type in books, John Hogue, you'll see prompted up all of my books that are in print and in ebooks.
John Hogue, listen, we've got to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed, and take care, and I hope 2018 goes well for you personally. Take care.
Thank you, Howard.
The Unexplained at Talk Radio. Coming next, we're going to talk with a man who is, I think, pretty remarkable. His name is Mike Godfrey, and he calls himself an ethical hacker. We're going to find out what that is and why that's important in this current era, at this particular time, when there are so many threats to our security.
Shield cell.
And various other ways of money and we'll talk with Mike Godfrey coming next here on the Unexplained at Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online and on DAB. Access all radios.
Talk Radio. Give it some lip.
Oh, poor darling, you've got a cold. Here's a good trick worth its weight in gold. One set of pills to help the day through. A helping hand to stop you being blue. Again at bedtime when sleep is sufficed.
Heat sink.
It can help you rest easy at night. Lemsip Max Day and Night Cold and Flu Relief.
Shield
helps
cell.
you get a restful sleep.
contains paracetamol.
Are you ready for this? Or a bit of this? And obviously this.
Mom, please can I have another ice cream?
If you've been nodding along, then it's time you joined the millions of others with the Sun Holes from £9.50. Hole yeah! Pick up the Sun and start collecting today. T's and C's apply.
There's a lot to look forward to in 2018. Come on, the drama of the Premier League.
Don't miss it, don't miss it.
Golf majors and the Ryder Cup.
I can't look, but I have to.
Sky Bet Championship.
Stick it between the posts.
International Rugby Union.
This is incredible.
Formula One. And ECB Cricket. 2018 on Sky Sports.
Ford's new fraud scrappage scheme has been extended to include vehicles registered before the 31st of December 2010, and we've even included a new model, the Tough Ford Ranger. You could save between £2,000 and £7,000 on the recommended retail price when you trade in your old vehicle for a new Ford commercial vehicle. New year, new Ford. Ford. Together, we'll go further.
Retail customers only who trade in a vehicle registered before 31st of December 2010. Scrappage savings between £2,000 and £7,000 dependent on model up to the recommended retail price excluding VAT. Selected models excluded. Contract from 1st of January to 31st of March 2018 and register from 1st of January to the 30th of September 2018. At participating Ford dealers only. T's and C's apply. Visit ford.co.uk/scrappage for more information.
The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
Well, we have to say not everybody entirely convinced by John Hogue there. Maybe I need to be doing another interview with him sometime where we get him to explain to us maybe a little more clearly the process by which those prophecies or predictions for the year come through. Maybe that was my fault that I just didn't do enough to get that explained, because I have to say I'm still a little in the dark. And Penguin Land and Catherine, thank you very much for your tweets. Points understood. Right, we're going to hear a little bit of my podcast from this week with a remarkable and amazing guy who I liked a lot. More and more companies, you only have to look at the last year where we had the NHS hit by a major hack and other organizations hit by a major hack. How many of these are going to happen this year? Well, a lot of organizations are going to people called ethical hackers who basically understand how to hack websites and hack systems. But what these companies are doing is going to people like Mike Godfrey, who we're about to hear from, and getting him to break into their systems and then go back to them and tell them what's wrong with their systems to make them stronger. This sounds like good stuff. So from my podcast from this week, here's a little bit of... I liked him a great deal. See what you think. This is Mike Godfrey, ethical hacker.
Really, it's exactly as it says on the tin. We're ethical hackers. So what we do for companies is we'll look to attack companies from a remote perspective, a physical perspective, like completely digitally, in all kinds of ways to simulate real-world attacks from nefarious hackers. So we use the same tools, techniques, methodologies, operating systems, exactly the same methods that a nefarious hacker would use. The only difference to us as ethical hackers as opposed to nefarious hackers is that once we've exploited a company, of course on their instruction, then rather than running away with all their money, we give it back to them and provide a full report. Really, that's the only difference between us and serious organised criminal gangs, definitely.
Right, and in order to be able to do this, and you don't have to answer this question, but a lot of people who do the kind of stuff that you do have had experience on the dark side before they come over to the light side. Have you?
I wouldn't say that I've so much got experience on the dark side, and I actually wanted to become an ethical hacker in 2003 when I was 15. Now, basically, I wrote a piece of software which was responsible for sending out millions of emails a day at the time, and it wasn't illegal, there was nothing nefarious about it, but really, the term hacker has been hijacked, so people now think it's this kind of dark and nefarious term, when in reality, hackers have been around since the 60s and 70s, from the days of radio, from phone phreaking, and really hacking just means taking something out of its intended use. I mean, that's it, really. There's nothing to say that hacking necessarily is bad. So, for example, I've got a Canon 7D camera, and we've changed the HDMI output to be an HDMI input, so you can play a PlayStation on it. That device is hacked. That doesn't mean that we've stolen any intellectual property or we've done anything nefarious with it, but it's a hacked device. And that really is where hacking comes from.
Do you know, you're dead right. You're reminding me now of something that goes back years, to the dawn of DVDs, really, when people started getting DVD players. You know that all DVD players are by region. So there's Australasia, there's Europe and Africa, and the United States, which is a big region by itself. I think there are 3 DVD regions, and players that you used to buy in England, and whichever region you were in, usually the shop would only sell you one that would play DVD discs from the region that you were in for commercial reasons. But some players that you could get could be, and the word that was used then was hacked. I'd forgotten that. And if you found the right code to put into them, then you could hack the DVD player and they would play DVDs from any region.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're talking about PAL and NTSC, and yeah, absolutely. Like you said, a lot of devices that we buy in England are locked to PAL, and America's NTSC. So yeah, absolutely, that was definitely a big thing. And also PlayStations and other devices. PlayStations used to be chipped, so you could play copied games on them. And yeah, I mean, that really is hacking. So I built a go-kart out of a lawnmower, and I've built a number of hovercrafts out of petrol leaf blowers. 100% that is hacking. Taking something out of its intended use is hacking, absolutely. So yeah, sadly we're kind of under this kind of dark, nefarious layer of hacking that people understand. But in reality, we've got no interest in doing anything legal. We never have done. Which is why all the people that we employ have definitely got an interest in the web and the internet and attacking stuff. And don't get me wrong, I love what I do. I love attacking stuff, and I definitely love taking stuff out of its intended use and hacking stuff. And for me, it's a real buzz. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to go and break the law. And for me, it was a big thing. My mum was actually a victim of credit card fraud when I was younger, and she was a single parent, and I saw her not be able to use her card in the shopping centre, and she was absolutely distraught. And from then, not that I had any kind of inkling to do anything legal anyway, but that really hit home to me that a lot of people, for example, online in the hacking community and in the various hacking community are what's known as carders. So they carry out a lot of credit card fraud, which is actually surprisingly difficult. People think it's easy, but it's actually not. And for me, that's just something I've never ever been interested in. Like I said, from that experience with my mum, it really kept me on the straight and narrow, definitely.
And a lot of people who do credit card fraud, you know, they think it's a victimless crime, and they think it's a crime for which they will not be caught. But ultimately they are. You know, it happened to me once. My card was cloned at a petrol station of all places, a gas station, and it took a long time for this to surface and be realized, but somebody posed as me, and I think they withdrew cash in Canada when I was somewhere else, and clearly it wasn't me. But all the people who did this, they were caught and they were banged up for it, and you know, quite rightly. So it's not, you know, it's not a crime that is as easy to escape with as some of these people tend to think. I would suspect.
No, and this is what you find a lot. So, for example, with the TalkTalk hack, which we were actually the ethical hackers that discovered TalkTalk being hacked when I found the data for sale on the dark web, and this kid that attacked it really used an automated tool to find that attack. He's 16, 17 years old, so he's quite young, and he's used that tool to do that, and now he's potentially facing time in prison. So, yeah, a lot of people think that this is kind of something you can do in your bedroom without getting caught, and that might have been the case 15 years ago. But now the Met Police and the police in general are really, really on the case of this.
So let's look at the profile of your average hacker. We get this view of a kid in his bedroom, or her bedroom, who's very savvy with all of this stuff, and of course has the ability to give all of his or her time to it in a way that people who are working for a living on the other side, you know, they're doing a job. They're working 9 to 5. Once they go home from whatever company it is, that's it for them. But if you're somebody in your bedroom and you are totally into your tech, then you can spend an awful long time working a perfect way into systems that you shouldn't be getting into, and that's the enemy now, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, and you raised such a valid point where I actually gave a talk at Scotland Yard about this to the Met, where they were saying, look, how can we upskill their operatives to reach the level of hackers? And I said, look, sadly, you're too late. Well, for me, I learned TCP/IP from the age of 11 or 12. So my dad first bought us a 486 computer from a company called Linux when I was 7 years old. So when was this, 95? And from then, I've been hacking computers. It's as simple as that. Now, the problem that organisations like the Met have got, for example, is that they have people that go on a career track. So even if they've got an interest in computers, they join the police. They then have to do 2 years on what's called being an on-the-beat bobby. So they have to do 2 years on the street. Then they can start just sort of working with the cybercrime division or the cyber-terrorism unit or whoever. Then they start becoming skilled in hacking. So by now they're 25. And by the time they've actually finished a degree, they're kind of my age. So I'm 29 now. And the problem that they've got is that when I was a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid, absolutely, like you said, I'd be on a computer from the minute I got home from school until 4 in the morning. So that kind of commitment that you can commit to when you're a kid, it simply can't be achieved once you hit adult life and once you start finding cups and you have kids and other stuff that really consumes your life. So it's a constant struggle to upskill and to kind of chase these kids. At the same time, it is a bit of a myth that these nefarious hackers and people that are carrying out super high-level exploits to kids in their bedroom, the reality of it is that you normally get a base skill set by the time you're kind of 16 to 18. And by then, you probably looked at things like TCP/IP, probably looked at things like networking, but the really skilled, capable hackers that are really earning serious money from this, generally in mid-20s to mid-30s, that's kind of the generation that do this. And you definitely do build that skill set up over that 10-year period, without a doubt. And that's kind of the reality of it, to be honest.
There's an awful lot more of that on my latest edition of the podcast at theunexplained.tv. That man's name is Mike Godfrey. He runs an organization called Insignia. They are the good guys of hacking. They know the techniques to do it, and they help organizations to try and beat people using the techniques that they use for bad reasons. Good stuff. Del Monte, thank you very much for your tweet, and thanks very much for all of your support throughout this show tonight. The Unexplained's always a bit of a roller coaster, but that's the exciting thing about it, really, because you never know quite what's coming next and how it's going to play. But that proves that it's a live show, and that's how the cookie crumbles, like they say. Coming next, a man you really will love. He is one of the world's most famous space scientists. His name is Professor Avi Loeb.
Talk Radio. Digital debate for the UK.
Talk Radio.
We'll get you talking.
At Jet2 Holidays, we know all the things that make a great holiday, so we do all of them. Like having thousands of free child places, 22 kilograms of baggage included, and a choice of spacious family rooms for quality time together, all for just a £60 deposit. Book your next ABTA and ATOL protected holiday now and get £100 off per person. Jet2 Holidays. Package holidays you can trust, subject to availability and conditions.
As an employer, I like to look after my staff. Like remembering birthdays and making sure we don't run out of tea bags, that sort of thing. But I'm also responsible for the really important things too, like providing a workplace pension. But I've no say in what's on the radio.
Even if you only employ one person, you have to provide a workplace pension. It's the law. Get to know your responsibilities with help from the pensions regulator. Visit workplacepensions.gov.uk.
With PerTemp's recruitment, opportunity is closer than you think. It can take you to places you've always wanted to be, and it's around every corner. So if you're looking for your next permanent, temporary or contract opportunity, hop into one of our 200 local offices or search PerTemps online. PerTemps, the face of recruitment.
Sky Mobile is bursting with brilliant offers. Get a Samsung Galaxy S8 with a Gear Fit 2 Pro worth £209. For just £32 a month with no upfront costs. Plus, enjoy double data on all our phones with 1 gig for the price of 500 meg. For a mobile offer that's bursting with brilliance, search Sky Mobile.
Double data ends 1st of Feb and is lost upon leaving the plan outside offer period. Subject to status and credit check. 30-month interest-free loan and data plan required. 12-month min-term. 18+. Price includes £5 per month data plan with 1 gig and pay-as-you-go calls and texts for non-Sky TV customers. Terms apply.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
We are Talk.
Talk Radio. Give it some lip.
Talk Radio.
From the Sky News Centre at 12. UKIP's ruling body has passed a unanimous vote of no confidence in party leader Henry Bolton. It follows a row over offensive messages sent by his 25-year-old girlfriend. Party members will now be given a vote on whether the former army officer should remain in his post. It's emerged gunmen in Kabul killed more than 30 people when they stormed a luxury hotel. The attackers in army uniforms battled Afghan special forces for hours on Saturday. 14 of those killed are known to have been foreigners. Mumtaz Ahmed saw what happened.
There were elders and children inside the hotel rooms, and the attackers were knocking on the doors of each room to reach their targets. They killed ordinary people and officials. They were targeting foreigners especially.
It's thought many people may be overconfident about their ability to spot a scam. A survey by the Take 5 to Stop Fraud campaign shows 4/5 think they could confidently identify a fraudulent approach, but a separate quiz shows less than 1 in 10 have the skills to do so. A children's charities revealed more than 100,000 counselling sessions for mental health issues have been held within a year. The number of young people seeking help from Childline for mental and emotional problems, self-harm or suicidal thoughts is up 12%. To sport, and Watford have appointed former Malaga manager Javi Gracia as their new coach. He's replaced Marco Silva, who was only sacked by the Premier League side this morning. Joe Townsend reports.
The Spaniard signed an 18-month contract to become Watford's 10th boss since the Pozzo family took over in 2012. His CV also includes a spell in Greece, but his most recent job was at Russian club Rubin Kazan. Silva's exit came after a run of just 1 win in 11 league games. Watford have publicly blamed Everton for that, saying their failed approach for him was the catalyst for that poor form.
And Northern Ireland's Mark Allen's won Snooker's Masters for the first time. He beat England's Kyron Wilson 10-7 at London's Alexandra Palace. That's the latest. I'm Barry Weir.
The following program contains graphic audio images of the supernatural and scenarios depicting paranormal activity that some listeners may find disturbing. Views expressed in the program are solely those of the presenter and do not in any way reflect the opinions, beliefs, or policies of Talk Radio.
Untwist the lid on Talk Radio's specimen jar of the psychic, the supernatural, and the simply unexplainable. The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
In the dead of night, The Unexplained with Howard Hughes. Thank you very much, wherever in the world you are, for listening to this show and for being part of it, and also for the great emails that you've been sending, various parts of the world responding over the last week. I always get to see those. Usually I wake up groggy-eyed on a Monday morning about 10 a.m., turn on the computer because I'm addicted to the thing. Go into the email and see what you've been saying about the show. So please, if you want to get in touch with me, go to my website, theunexplained.tv. And you can follow the link and send me an email from there. I love to hear from you with your suggestions for guests or just thoughts on the way that we do the show. Kind of stuff we talk about here. Now, you know that after midnight, it's usually the time when I like to get into things a little more deeply. It's more of a conversation. And one of the people that you've liked most since we began doing this version on the radio here at Talk Radio has been Professor Avi Loeb. Now, Avi is the Frank Baird Jr. Professor of Science at Harvard University. Now, that's a title, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, let me just explain to you what that means. It just means that he is one of the most important people in the space and scientific community in the world. And I'm absolutely thrilled that Avi makes time to talk with us, as he's done tonight. Avi, thank you very much for talking with us. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm very well.
I don't think we've ever dwelt too much on your story, Avi, because normally I've just been getting you on here, throwing you a news story, and then you've been reacting to it or explaining why I've got it all completely backwards and forwards. You know, I've got it the wrong way around. So tell me about you, because I was reading your biography today, and you literally started life on a farm and ended up where you are now.
That's correct. I grew up on a farm, and I used to collect eggs every afternoon. And in the weekends, I would go to the hills and read philosophy books. I was mostly interested in the big picture, even though my daily life, my daily routine was in the farm. And I always dreamt of spending my life addressing philosophy questions, the most fundamental questions we have. But then circumstances led me to astrophysics, and I was offered a position at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton for 5 years, and I took it. Under one condition, they asked me to study astronomy. And then I was eventually offered tenure at Harvard, and at that point I realized it's too late to go back to philosophy, even though it was my true love. But then I realized something quite thrilling, that in fact the arranged marriage to astronomy was a marriage to the woman I really love. And in fact, there are philosophical questions that we are addressing on a daily basis in astronomy. And these are the ones that I prefer to focus on. For example, how did the universe start? Or are we alone? And what would happen if we establish contact with another civilization? How would it change our perception on reality?
Do you think that we're getting nearer and have got nearer in this last year or so to answering that question about whether we're alone or not? It seems that we're discovering more, for example, about Mars, but maybe the answer, as it's increasingly looked over the last year, the answer to that question is perhaps a little less likely to be found on Mars and maybe found somewhere else now.
Well, the biggest news over the past couple of decades is that there are many habitable planets out there. A quarter of all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy have a planet just at the right distance to have liquid water on its surface. And so that implies that there are lots of opportunities for life to develop. As to the question of whether intelligent life exists, we don't know, but the way to address it is by searching the sky for signals for alien civilizations. And it's sort of like looking at the mirror. You're looking for something that sounds familiar, that is artificial in origin, that cannot be explained as a natural process. And our imagination is limited by what we see in the mirror. So 50 years ago, our imagination was limited to radio communication, because that's the technology that we developed around the Second World War that was that could in principle transmit signals across galactic distances. And so the first searches were for radio signals. But now we realize that in fact, there is much more to technology beyond radio communication. We could search for industrial pollution in the atmospheres of other planets by examining the composition of those atmospheres. We could search for beacons of light that are used for example, for propelling spacecrafts. This is a technology that we are just starting to develop here on Earth. For example, in the context of the project Starshot that is currently funded, we can search for artifacts on the surfaces of planets, and that includes photovoltaic cells that may reflect the starlight differently than the bare rock on the planet's surface. And so there are lots of ways that we can imagine now. For example, a civilization that sits on a planet that faces the star always with the same side. These are called tidally locked planets. And these are all the habitable planets around stars that are much less massive than the sun. These are called dwarf stars. For example, the nearest star to the sun is Proxima Centauri, and it has about 12% of the mass of the sun. And there is a planet that is in the habitable zone around that star that was discovered about a year ago. And that planet faces the star always with the same side. So there is a permanent night side and a permanent day side, and in between them there is a permanent sunset strip where the real estate value is probably the highest. And you might think that if there is a civilization on such a planet, it would try to extract power from the permanent day side and transfer it to the permanent night side. Otherwise, as my daughter told me, she's 12 years old, she said, otherwise she would like to have on such a planet two houses, one in which she sleeps at night, and the other one in which she goes back during the day. And so if you want to make the conditions more suitable for life on both sides, you might want to, for example, cover the surface of the day side with photovoltaic cells, extract stellar light energy from there, and transfer it via electricity to the other side. So either light it up, the permanent night side, or warm it up so that it's more suitable for life. And
we're assuming, aren't we, Avi, that they, if there are a they there, were there to be a civilization on this particular planet, or one like it, they would think as we think. They would be as we are.
You're right. So in fact, I just wrote an article, an essay that I published in Scientific American a couple of weeks ago that asks the fundamental question: are alien civilizations technologically advanced? And as the physicist Enrico Fermi asked, where is everybody? We discovered numerous habitable planets around other stars in the Milky Way, including Proxima Centauri that I just mentioned, the nearest star. And one cannot help but wonder why have we not detected evidence for an advanced civilization as of yet. And one possible solution that I suggested is that perhaps exoplanet politics explains Fermi's paradox. That in fact human history allows us to imagine the possibility that our civilization could have remained dominated by the mindset of the Middle Ages until under a different political scenario and until now. And such a scenario is imaginable definitely over a timescale of thousands of years. We don't know if it would prevail over millions or billions of years, but perhaps we were very lucky to mature as a technological civilization. And then if that's true, then when we search other planets, we will find on the surfaces of other planets either relics of advanced civilizations that destroyed themselves by self-inflicted catastrophes, like, for example, climate change or nuclear, biological, or chemical wars. Or we would find living civilizations that are technologically primitive. So it's quite possible that the reason we don't see a signal is simply because technological civilizations like our own are short-lived. They destroy themselves after a while.
So there are three facets then to this. For people who say, it's ridiculous, we're getting so much information out now, surely we need to have discovered something by this point, otherwise we're wasting our money. Actually, it's more complicated than most people believe, because not only have you got to find the right planet, the right star, you've also got to find it at the correct point in the development of anybody who might be living there. If you get it at the wrong time, then they will be pre-industrial and they won't leave a large footprint. If you get it when they're all finished and they've destroyed themselves, they develop themselves to the point some people are saying we're getting there now, then there will be no sign either. You have to see them at their optimal development.
Exactly. And in principle, they might also keep a low-key technological profile if they are very advanced, just to sustain their biosphere, maintaining a lifestyle reminiscent of Henry Thoreau on Walden Pond. And they would basically not modify much their environment under these circumstances. So the only way to find out if those are the circumstances is to actually visit the surfaces of other planets and travel there. Most astronomers think conservatively that we can build bigger telescopes and search the sky for signals because that's less expensive, but it may not give us the full picture. We might need to go and visit those planets, and we can do that, over a period of a billion years. We can visit a lot of, billions of planetary systems and do what I call astrosociology or astroanthropology, trying to figure out what are the societies that exist out there. Are they, for example, faith-based, or are they technological? If they are faith-based cultures, instead of advanced civilizations that have infrastructure from where we can learn about our own technological development, even that would be fascinating, because we could explore the diversity of galactic interpretations for the concept of God, for example. It would be fascinating to see the statistics, of how many civilizations believe in what type of God, depending on their host star, depending on their environment, and so on.
Is it possible we may actually be living, and I never thought I would be asking you this question, but as we wrap up this segment, it is a good one to ask you. Is it possible that we may be living in something that's not real, in somebody else's experiment, within a hologram, or within, I don't know, I'm trying to hark back to the lyrics of that famous Noel Harrison song, Windmills of Your Mind, within a circle, in a spiral, a wheel within a wheel. In other words, is it possible that what we're seeing out there is not quite what we think it is? Is that worth even considering?
It is possible, but I don't believe in conspiracies. And often, people that have these complicated models of the world end up in institutions that are not realistic. In this context, another possible explanation for Fermi's paradox is that, we can see already the seeds for that in our own technology right now. People can get addicted to virtual reality. We can imagine machines that satisfy the needs of people to the point where they will not be connected to the reality. They will be connected to a machine that provides them with a virtual reality. And, the addiction to cell phones is the beginning of that, but you can imagine something more sophisticated in the future where people will just connect to a machine and feel happy, and that will be it. It's sort of like getting addicted to drugs, except that in this case, it's electronic. And the question is whether the society should protect itself from that. It's possible that very advanced aliens are just hooked to virtual reality machines, and they're not communicating with us because of that. That's a possibility. But I would find it, unlikely that what we see is a sort of an experiment by some other civilization, because it's too complex, and I just prefer not to believe in conspiracies. That's my personal taste.
And yet we've had decades of reports of so-called aliens intervening at important moments, or intervening to, for example, stop nuclear missiles from functioning for a while, to demonstrate power. The word on the street is that maybe we are being supervised, or at least we're being observed. We are being, what was that word that Richard Burton used in War of the Worlds, the intro, scrutinized, like creatures in a petri dish.
My guess is most of these instances can be explained by human incompetence. And the one thing to notice about, for example, reports on UFOs, unidentified flying objects, is that they're always marginal, they're never conclusive. And thinking about how technology, the detection technology evolved over the decades, we now have much better tools to detect evidence for unidentified flying objects. We have better instruments. Nevertheless, all these reports are always marginal. They're always, just barely clear that, what you're seeing is indeed something unexplainable. And so that, to me, implies that either the aliens are modifying their behavior so that they are always at the cutting edge of our technology. They're always just at the margins of being detected.
So they will remain so near yet so far away.
Yes, which I find unlikely. Or that these are just, false signals, or perhaps, defense-related things that we just don't know about, or that other countries are doing. So, it might make sense for agencies dedicated to protecting or defending a country to make sure that, there is nothing hostile from other countries associated with these instances. But I don't believe there is, as of yet, any credible evidence for an alien civilization.
Okay, we're listening to Professor Avi Loeb, one of the coolest space scientists that you've ever heard, because he is the philosopher of space, and that's what makes him different from so many others. More from him, and we're going to ask some specific questions about some specific things coming right up here on the Unexplained at Talk Radio.
Talk Radio, 24-hour radio debate and entertainment.
Talk Radio.
We'll get you talking.
Are you ready for this? Or a bit of this? And obviously this.
Mom, please can I have another ice cream?
If you've been nodding along, then it's time you joined the millions of others with the Sun Holes from £9.50. Hole yeah! Pick up the Sun and start collecting today. T's and C's apply.
Winston Wolf, direct line. You are?
Jane, the landlord.
So I understand a piece of equipment is misfiring. There'll be some cold bodies in this house. Sorry, Jane, your boiler is broken.
Oh, it's going to cost an arm and a leg.
Don't worry, you've got direct line landlord insurance. They cover boiler breakdowns as standard with buildings cover. Get it repaired or replaced, they'll pay the cost.
Brilliant.
Switch for boiler breakdown cover as standard with buildings cover. Can your insurance do that? Search Direct Line Landlord. Excludes wear and tear. £200 excess supplies. Not a call-out service. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
I've got someone here on the phone. Says he's Robert, my broadband customer service manager. He says there are problems in the area, which there are, and as I'm a valid customer, they're offering me a refund. Great. Just so long as I confirm all my card details. That tells me Robert is not who he says he is. My money? My info? I don't think so.
Always question uninvited approaches and never give out personal or financial details in case it's a scam. Take 5 to stop fraud.
The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
Professor Avi Loeb is here. He is an amazing space scientist, but he also talks a lot of philosophy and common sense about the search for the meaning of who we are and what our place in the cosmos might be. Just to, Avi, to end this little discussion that we had before we took some commercials about extraterrestrials, aliens, and all the rest of it. What did you make, if anything, of the enormous flap in the press, and apparently there's going to be more in America in a month or two, about this secret research program that ran for, I think, 5 years at a cost of $20 million, which is a drop in the research bucket, really, designed to identify specific threats and entities that might be out there, and the testimony of 2 pilots that were given within this, saying that we saw something that moved at such a tremendous speed, we don't have that capability. Just as a man of space and a man of thought, what did you make of that?
Yeah, I do think that it makes sense to consider these reports in the context of national defense, in the sense of trying to make sure that they are not related to any hostility or hostile behavior of other countries that are trying to spy on the United States or do something. And in that regard, it's useful to look at the evidence and decide. But in terms of things that violate the laws of physics, I would find it extremely unlikely, because we have so many laboratory experiments and other evidence from astronomy that the laws of physics are satisfied to exquisite precision, and there is no deviation as of yet in controlled environments where we know what's going on for any deviation from those laws. So I would put at a very low priority an examination of something that violates the laws of physics, for example.
So that leads us to the thought that possibly someone somewhere, for reasons of their own, for subterfuge of some kind, might have the capability of implanting thoughts and impressions within the minds of people like those pilots, so that they believe they've seen something like that. But in fact, what they've encountered is something perhaps very secret, and some kind of backstory to do with it is projected onto them. I mean, look, this is all in the realms of speculation, but my guess is as good as anybody else's.
Well, it could be a mirage. It could, sometimes you see something that it's not really an object moving, but it's actually an image that is scanning across the sky because of some other reason. And you can move a laser beam, for example, across the sky, and it would look as if it moves faster than light, but it will not. And there are all kinds of things you can do that are not real. And it could be that it's one of them, or it could be that this was just something that appears on the sky but is not a real object. It's like an illusion. And there is no reason to speculate, because all of these reports were about one-time events that could not be verified. So extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and so far we don't have that. And so
I've got a lot of claims and a lot of videos on YouTube, but very little, as you say, evidence. Let me take you on to some things that have appeared in the media recently. I know that did, but this is something that was reported much around Christmas. This is that asteroid, Oumuamua, I think is how you say it. I still struggle with that. In the news today has been a team of scientists led by Russian billionaire Yuri Milner are scanning this bizarre space object dubbed Oumuamua for signs of alien technology. Astronomers are baffled, apparently, by its peculiar 1,300-foot long, 260-foot wide appearance, the first interstellar object to enter our solar system. In other words, the first thing from way out there to appear. And people were saying all sorts of things about this. They were saying that it might house aliens, it might be completely different in a whole variety of ways. What do we know about this, and why are people like, for example, Stephen Hawking so interested in it?
Well, I should take the blame for that, because when I first heard about Oumuamua...
I love the way you say. Can you say that again for me?
Well, Oumuamua, that's the way the natives say it. It's actually in Hawaiian. It means it means a messenger from far away, and this is the first object that was discovered to come from outside the solar system, that passes so close to Earth. It's unbound to the sun. It moves too fast to be bound to the sun. So it's on its first passage, and it will then fly out of the solar system. But it takes it a while because it moves roughly at the speed of a planet. So, it takes years, many years, for it to cross the solar system. So that means that if we see one such object, there are many more already within the solar system on its way to us or on its way out, because it takes them, hundreds, thousands of years to cross the entire solar system. So at this point in time, they must be already there if we saw one of them, and it's a common object. Now, the strange thing about this object is that it's unlike any other object we've seen in the solar system. It has its long axis is 10 times longer than its short axis, so it's 10 times longer than it is wide. And the most elongated object we've seen before, the most elongated asteroid, was roughly 1 to 3 axis ratio. This one is 1 to 10 or even more. And we haven't imaged it, but that already alerted me to how peculiar it is that the very first object is so elongated. And in addition, we didn't expect to see such an object. I wrote a paper about 5 years ago predicting how many interstellar objects should we see, and it was off by almost 1 million. So these objects apparently are 1 million times more abundant than we thought before.
So this adds to the mystery of this thing, because it is sort of cigar-shaped when most things that come past us are not. It comes from somewhere where things haven't heretofore been noticed or observed by us. They may well have come our way, but we now have the technology to see them. So there is enormous, great sense of mystery about this thing.
That's right, and that led me to write an email to Yuri Milner, alerting him to the existence of this object. There were a number of reports about it, about its properties, and I told Yuri that I'll be glad to speak with him about it because I was supposed to visit Palo Alto a few days later, and he invited me for a discussion of an hour or so, in which I presented all the evidence that we have about this object. We don't have an image, but it looks quite peculiar. And so Yuri said, why don't we observe, check whether it has any radio transmission, because it does look like a probe. It does sound like a probe, a very elongated object that comes from interstellar space. And so it looks very similar to the kind of design we had for the project Starshot. That's a project to send a probe to another star system, and in order to minimize its friction with the surrounding medium, with the interstellar medium, we thought of a design that looks like a needle, like a cigar. And
like a javelin, isn't it? That's why a javelin is such an effective thing, and that's why those throwers of javelins at the Olympics look so accomplished when they throw that thing, because it is aerodynamically shaped. So that begs another question. Javelins are aerodynamically shaped. The clue is in the word. They're shaped to fly through our air like that. But how would something evolve in that shape to transit through space? What would have created that?
Well, that's an interesting question, and if you think about natural processes, I was trying to come up with a reasonable scenario. it's not easy to come up with something that produces needle-shaped objects. So we both agreed with Yuri that it might be helpful to just check if there is any radio transmission. And there is an initiative from the Breakthrough Foundation called Breakthrough Listen, which is intended to search for signals from alien civilizations, mostly in the radio, using, for example, the Green Bank telescope or the Parkes telescope in Australia. And so we decided that it would be a good idea to use the Green Bank telescope in Virginia to search for any possible radio signal. And indeed, a few days later, it was used, and we were able to put a limit down to a level of a tenth of the power transmitted by a single cell phone. So given that this object is, roughly at the distance of Jupiter, radio telescopes are so powerful that we could have detected transmission that is 1/10, 10 times smaller than a single cell phone, and we haven't detected that.
Which is astonishing. So that indicates to us either this is a dead piece of rock, or if there is anything that is what we might term an extraterrestrial on board, it is using technology that we can't detect.
Well, probably it's not, it's just rock, but the lesson is that since there are many more such objects that will pass in the future, now that we are aware of their existence, next time an object like that comes near the Earth, we should either take a photo or learn more about it. And these objects move. This object moves too fast for us to chase it with existing rockets. It's moving faster than all the probes that NASA launched in the past. So we can't really catch up with it. But with future technology like the one developed by the Starshot project, we might be able to send a probe that will, reach it and take some photographs, and perhaps we'll learn some more about it.
And look, I'm not a scientist, but it would seem to me that these things are perhaps as interesting for themselves as they are for what they represent. In other words, what might an object like this have been through? What might it have passed through that we don't yet understand? So it's what it brings. It's almost like the luggage, the baggage it brings with it.
That's right, and you can think of it as a small spacecraft that traveled through space for billions of years potentially. And one way to travel through space is to build our own spacecraft, but another one is to put something, like a camera, on an object like that. If we can only reach it and plant something on it, eventually it will leave the solar system. However, objects that move at this speed takes them 100,000 years to get to the nearest star. So, it's a long journey, but they eventually make it. If we want to reach the nearest star within our lifetime, we need a probe that moves at a fraction of the speed of light, at about a fifth of the speed of light. That's what we're trying to do with Starshot.
And where are we at with Starshot now?
Well, at the moment we are studying the technology, and the next 5 years will be dedicated for that. And the critical technology is the laser technology, because the goal is to push a lightweight probe that weighs roughly a gram with a very powerful laser beam. And the most essential ingredient of this scheme, laser propulsion, is the laser itself. And so we are just in the process of establishing partnership with a number of experimental teams that will demonstrate the laser technology. That will start to do that. The goal is to invest about $100 million over the next 5 years to figure out if we can build the strong, powerful laser that will push a light sail, a lightweight sail.
Theoretically, then, and how big would this sail be?
It will be in size, a few meters in diameter, but then in weight it will be just 1 gram or so, a few grams.
And how would you get that thing out of our atmosphere? Presumably you'd have to launch it on a rocket and then deploy it in space, is that right?
There will be a mother ship that will carry those in its belly and just release them when they are in the right place so that the laser can shoot at them.
And we have technology so refined that a laser can pinpoint something that is moving away from Earth at speed. It can actually continue to target and hit this thing over vast distances. That boggles the mind.
Well, it just needs to do it for a few minutes because this thing will eventually move at a fifth of the speed of light. It will so the launch distance is 5 times the distance to the moon, but it takes only a few minutes for such an object to traverse that distance, and so the laser needs to be on for a few minutes and provide a power that is similar to the power necessary for liftoff of the space shuttle. So it's roughly the same amount of energy, the same amount of time that was used for liftoff of the space shuttle.
So because there is no resistance to speak of up there, you can give this thing a push, a hell of a push, and a great speed of a push, and it will continue on for a very, 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 very long way, just on the basis of that one laser push. That is astonishing.
Right, there is not much stuff out there in the interstellar space, so it will not be stopped by friction. It will continue along its path. But the bad news is that you cannot really decelerate it. You cannot brake so that it would land on the surface of another planet. If you want to land on the surface of another planet, you need to launch a spacecraft that is based on rocket propulsion, just like the slow spacecraft that we are launching now. That could slow down close to a planet and land on it. The issue with this laser propulsion is that you need, in order to slow it down, you need a similar laser system on the surface of the target planet, and we don't have that.
That's, well, but so how far can you track it for then? If it's only a gram in weight, how can you fit on board a transmitter that will send you signals back? How can it let you know where it is?
Well, communication is one of the critical issues, but we did some early calculations that indicate that it's possible. It's possible to communicate with it. However, we will not be able to maneuver, to give it instructions where to turn. So it will need to be on a ballistic orbit that is targeting whatever we want to reach, the planet or the star that we want to reach, when it will be there. And so we could, the advantage of this technology is that one can launch a lot of spacecraft, not just one, because each of them is relatively cheap. It will be hundreds of dollars per such a spacecraft. And even if one misses the target, we can launch a lot of them such that it won't be an issue.
So it's almost like a child going to a boating lake, as we call them here. And, the child's father or mother making the child, or the child doing itself, a folded paper boat. And you push the boat out, and off it floats to wherever it will go. Of course, the boat will be stopped by the perimeters of whichever boating lake it is. They'll be either near or far. But this is this is a little paper boat that you push, and it keeps on going.
That's right. Another way to think of it is like you're sending a bottle that has something on it, like a message. But the thing is, if we saw something like that aiming at us, we would know that perhaps there is an alien civilization out there curious about our existence. The thing is,
we're looking for. So if somebody, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's, I think, partly down to the delay that we've got between us. But it is so fascinating, and I'm like a sort of child here, wanting to ask another question. But if we see evidence of one of these things being slowed down by something, then that in itself will be proof that there is something out there or someone out there to do the slowing down.
Right. The thing is that this kind of a spacecraft that I was describing for Starshot is too small for us to detect. The Oumuamua that we discussed before, Oumuamua, it has a scale of hundreds of meters, and so that was barely detected by our best telescopes that survey the sky right now. And so there might be a lot of flying objects out there that we haven't detected. At some point when we build big enough telescopes, we might reach a threshold where we can see those signals, and suddenly we would see that we're flooded with artifacts, with signals that are artificial, and that we are not alone. We would figure this out. The situation is similar to the LIGO experiment that for decades was trying to detect gravitational waves. It didn't detect anything, and people were criticizing the project. But once it reached a threshold where the signal was stronger than the sensitivity of the instrument, so in other words, they developed a sensitive enough instrument, suddenly, they started detecting signal after signal, and they got the Nobel Prize in physics for that. And so the point to recognize is that once you reach a sensitivity threshold, you might see a lot of signals, and before that you don't see anything.
Right.
So,
okay, let's park that point exactly there, because we have to come back and pick up from that in just a moment after some more commercials here, because we're not on a planet where they don't have commercials. So we're going to do that, and we're going to talk some more with Professor Avi Loeb about the Starshot project, and then we'll ask some more questions about some other cool stuff. Stay here.
Hynix, hello.
UK, online and on DAB.
We are Talk
Radio. Give it some lip.
There's a lot to look forward to in 2018. Come on. The drama of the Premier League. Don't miss it. Golf majors and the Ryder Cup.
I can't look, but I have to.
Sky Bet Championship.
Stick it between the posts.
International Rugby Union.
This is incredible.
Formula One.
Oh my.
And ECB Cricket. 2018 on Sky Sports.
Are you ready for this? Or a bit of this? And obviously this.
Mom, please can I have another ice cream?
If you've been nodding along, then it's time you joined the millions of others with the Sun Holes from £9.50. Hole yeah! Pick up the Sun and start collecting today. T's and C's apply.
Highways England is here to improve your journey. Have you noticed the red X's above you when driving on the motorway?
Hynix doing all right. On the hunt for some bromelite.
There's an obstruction or danger up ahead.
Aha.
So if you see one,
No,
you must change lanes safely to avoid a penalty, or even
I'm
worse.
just collecting some money, removing informants.
So when you see a red X,
about 3
it's there for a
million
reason.
For everyone.
For more information on red X's, search online for smart motorways.
The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
Talking space with Professor Avi Loeb from Harvard University here on The Unexplained at Talk Radio in the early hours of Monday morning as we are. Paul Ross here, of course, at 1 o'clock. Don't miss him through the night. We were talking about the Starshot project, and just to wrap this up, we got to the point where we were saying that as our telescopes get more and more sensitive, and I presume Moore's law applies to telescopes for looking at space just as it does with everything else. So there is almost exponential growth of the sensitivity and ability of these things. We are going to reach a point at which things that we couldn't have possibly
Hynix, one of your first
that will
streams.
be of interest to us, we will be able to see. Effectively, that's it, isn't it?
Yes.
We've had a
really,
question
I've only
in.
been doing it for about
Thank you
a week.
very much for
And
emailing this question in about something
It's
called
more,
EM drive.
just to see if I
Presumably,
can
I
actually
think
do
I've
it
heard something about
on the
this. This is a
equipment I've got,
method of
so-
propulsion, yeah?
Yes, it's called the electromagnetic propulsion, and the idea is that perhaps when
I'm never gonna
you
make money
arrange
from
for a
it,
special
so-
type of
but I thought I'd
cavity,
give it a go,
you can
see if it was
push
possible.
something to a high speed, sort
You
of
know,
like a thruster, using
loading
the
up
electromagnetic
OBS,
fields
having a play
inside
around
the
with that,
cavity. And
see all
it's
the
a
different bits and
controversial
pieces I can add to
scheme
it.
for accelerating to high speeds. The
So, yeah.
plausibility of these thrusters that have no propellant is controversial, and there are some claims that perhaps people see evidence that it's feasible and arguments
if we
that
can
it's
get
not.
this fella.
At this point, I would put it in the category of designs that are still have to be demonstrated in order to be taken seriously. There are lots of interesting advanced schemes for propulsion,
So yeah, still playing around with
including, some people suggest
Hynix, never say never, man. It's relatively easy to make some money from it. It just won't be much. LOL.
People
That's
suggested
true.
fusion. The
That's
problem
very
is we
true,
need to
especially
demonstrate
after
fusion reactors first
YouTube
for
decided that
energy-related consumption, and before we use
small
them for
YouTubers
space
were just
propulsion. So there are
insignificant
lots of other
filth.
schemes that were discussed, and
Which
so
is
far
interesting.
none is demonstrated.
Considering it was
Right,
that
I'm just being told by
insignificant
Cass, my
filth that
producer
made
here,
them all the
that
money.
Cass is always good at looking for these things.
And
the
I
EN drive
just can't
was
understand
designed by a
why
Brit,
they decided to do it.
Roger Scheuer. apparently,
It's
for
almost
Christmas.
as if
Now
we
I
had to do
realise
something
why I heard
about
this. My
that Logan
space
Paul
friend
fella.
Richard C. Hoagland
So what we've done
is
is
very keen on this research.
we've
So it's a
decided to
British
hit
guy
the
who's
people
doing the
who
research
don't
on
do
the
things
EN
like
drive.
that.
Right.
And
So we're
let
looking at
Logan
all
Paul
sorts of
get
ways
away
to
with it
propel
scot-free.
ourselves out into space. And because
I mean, what have they done?
technology
He's not
proceeds
part of
and
their
develops
preferred
at a
program.
rapid rate,
Oh,
it doesn't just go in
wow.
a straight line, it goes almost exponentially. We can expect within our lifetime.
You know, instead what we
Hynix, your talk radio is kind of overpowering your voice.
What do you think that we can expect to come out during this year? What are we looking for?
We are looking for, of course, more planets that are habitable and then possibly evidence for life on them.
That should help.
I should say I'm a little bit disappointed that the mainstream of astronomy is engaged in such
Yeah, so YouTube just shits all over anybody who's doing it as a hobby. It's just, they're just obnoxious people. Really are. Greed factor is unbelievable.
Intelligent life can travel across much greater distances because if they are much more powerful, you can see a source much farther away. And so the search volume would be far greater than the feeble signals that come from primitive life. And to me, it's a mystery. The sociology of the field is such that the search for intelligent life is not considered part of the search for life more generally. I actually just submitted a book proposal to work on a book that includes the search for life, describes it in all of its forms, both primitive and intelligent.
Of course, if there is intelligent life out there, we think of ourselves, sometimes I doubt it, we think ourselves as intelligent.
Hynix YT is no longer a voice for the common user. The top channels are all news and / all run by major corporations and maybe the lucky few who got into it when it was good.
Yeah, and especially with this latest net neutrality. I mean, if that thing goes ahead, it's just going to be like satellite TV all over again.
So we think of ourselves as being so damn cool. But in somebody else's book and chart, we don't even exist really. We're not that important. We've only just discovered fire.
Yes.
The thing is, on YouTube, I tend to follow much smaller channels. Because some of the other ones, it's just advert after advert after advert. It's sickening at times. And the greed factor, I mean, if you've watched any of that Logan, what's his face? What an awful piece of junk it is. There he is.
And perhaps as we harmonize with technology, perhaps as we become more and more...
Hynix, as an American, I can tell you that the majority of the citizens here are not wanting it to go through.
Good, because I know as a Brit, people say, oh well, it won't affect us, but it will, because that's where all the major stuff is. You know, it's in the US, so it is going to have an effect with the rest of the world, whether they like it or not. I just really hope it doesn't happen, because, you know, all hell's going to break out. Not that I don't think it's already happening to some degree. I mean, there was that debacle with it was one of the major ISPs over there throttling back. What was it, Netflix? I mean, that's just can't do things like that.
And that has implications because right now we are thinking about searching the surfaces of planets for evidence for life, but if in fact it's robots, they might actually go on spacecraft and, you know, be out there in
well, this fella's giving me the run around.
Doesn't transmit a very powerful signal, and so that's why we can't see them, but it may well be that interstellar space has a lot of traffic in it of small objects that are probes or include robots that are quite sophisticated.
Must admit,
and that's really
the ones I watch on YouTube, I don't know if you've heard of them.
An industrial civilization.
Kid behind a camera. I do enjoy watching that. That is funny.
Hynix, fortunately, I believe it still has to through the courts. but the Conservatives have control of that too. But we can hope that ISPs aren't putting money in their pockets as well.
Ha, yeah. Yeah, it's still got a few hurdles to cross. But, you know, just got to hope that they do the right thing.
Right.
Astra offline.
Is that this future technology of robots and electronics is a sort of like a monument that we're building that would last far longer than our personal
Yeah, kid behind the
lives.
camera.
And
He's
maybe
definitely
the
worth
ultimate
watching.
monument that would indicate
His
that
dad
we
was a
existed
nutter.
at some point in the history of the universe. And that will be the thing that will be left of us.
And obviously Boogie
eventually, because
2988. Watch a lot of his stuff. He was a good giggle.
You know, having liquid water and having the right temperature and so forth. We're too sensitive.
In fact, I
to
watch more
conditions, and
YouTube than I do broadcast TV.
Limit our future.
I find broadcast TV, especially in the UK, is just dull.
Creatures like our own, and we might put everything we
It's
have,
the same
all
old
the
crap on every channel.
knowledge that we have on things that would last far longer. And
if it's not some singing competition that's dull as arse, or a dancing competition.
Hynix, I don't even have cable anymore.
I must admit, we've only got it because the missus watches a lot of it. I'm either playing Elite or watching some of the creators on YouTube.
Hynix, it's all shite.
Yep, I have to agree.
Yes, that's definitely true. I mean, what we know, you can think about the knowledge as an island in a sea of ignorance. And, you know, we are making progress, we are increasing the land
I'm catching up.
Island as we make progress in science, but there are lots of things we don't know, and so, you know, that makes it still exciting for younger people to participate in this endeavor of science and technology.
Talk to me about the moon, Avi. There was a story around this week that was making great play of the fact that tunnels had been discovered, or certainly what appear to be the openings of tunnels.
Come on, I've got to be close enough.
Had been discovered, and possibly these might be usable for us to inhabit at some point. What was all that excitement about?
Well, the main issue on the moon is whether there are, you know, there is water that help us possibly inhabited. There are newly discovered tunnels that could be a place for us to inhabit that lie under the lunar surface, and that's related to lava from ancient volcanoes that might have bored miles-long voids beneath the moon's surface.
So the idea being that a volcano below the surface, just like if you go to Hawaii now, which is still active, you see the magma bubbling, spitting out. So if there was something like that, then it would have spat out perhaps some lava and would have left the vent through which that occurred.
Right. So these are sort of like tubes that may be, you know, hundreds of meters, and they eventually collapse. So, but we still have stable tubes that could be disrupted.
Astra online. Astra Wiggle.
Hynix tried the all-par build yet?
I'm not sure if I know what that is. Oh yeah, PS. Well, these are the advanced ones. Heatsink. The thing is with these missions, you just got to get in there, do as much damage as you can.
Hynixo, nice choice, man.
He's gone. Heatsink. And then just get out of there quick.
Slowly spiral away from the Earth and slow down
think I've got about 3,200 hull on this. So I'm not too worried about shields. It's the hull tank on the FAS that does it. And the PAs just absolutely sap the shields on the enemy. And then I've got the rail guns to hit the internals. So if you get them engineered, you know, they'll go through the armour, whatever armour's on there, it doesn't matter. It'll just go through and damage loads of internals.
And then eventually leaving the solar system and going to a habitable planet around another star. You know, I've been trying to convince my wealthy friends to buy real estate on Proxima B.
Hynix got super pen on the rails.
Especially on the
on one of them.
You know,
I've got
must be quite similar
penetration,
to see from,
and on the
Hawaii,
other
from Maui, when
I've
I was
got
standing there on the
Cascade
beach, this summer
to take
when we
care
went
of
there
the
with my family. I was thinking,
SCBs
what
on
would
the
it be
enemy,
like
because
to
those
see this
NPCs,
sunset,
when they
forever?
start,
You know, if you have,
they've got,
if you're on the
you know,
Sunstrip,
an unlimited supply, although it seems like they've got an
idle
unlimited supply of shield cell banks, and they just fire them one after the other. And as soon as I switched to one of them having
we will eventually ruin our planet. I mean, either artificially by changing the climate, or even if we treat it very well, eventually
having the feedback cascade,
ultimately, you know, within a billion years, the sun will get
it
too
just
hot,
stops them from using SCBs completely.
So
I mean, you'll see one fire off and you'll just hit the railgun and it'll stop immediately. So it stops them from just chaining one SCB after another.
If you Google my name, Avi Loeb, you'll find it.
Avi, thank you so much. I'm sure we will talk again and have a marvellous day.
You're most welcome.
Professor Avi Loeb, boy, that's it. Another big 3 hours has elapsed.
Hynix, I love using feedback hammers on people, LOL.
Yeah, you know what? I haven't gotten them. I've seen a couple of YouTube videos on them, and a lot of people have said they're just not worth it. So I haven't gone for them yet, but I will.
Next we meet, the Lord willing, please stay safe, please stay calm, and above all, please take care. Paul Ross is next. Good night.
Talk Radio, digital debate for the UK.
Pick up your phone and talk.
Hynix hammers are better for feedback cascade, but that's about it.
I'm watching the calories. How about one of our meals under 600 calories? There's the
Yeah, I'm
chicken
definitely
legend,
gonna have to try them.
carrot sticks and Coke Zero, or there's a grilled sweet chili chicken wrap.
Who'd have thought? With a range of meals under 600 calories at McDonald's, there's something for everyone. Serves after 10:30 a.m. Subject to availability. Participating restaurants only.
Where do you charge an electric car?
How quickly can I do it?
How far can you go on one charge?
How much can I save?
Can I charge it at home? Do I need a house with a drive? Can you get an
I
electric
definitely
truck off?
recommend
Plug in my mobile phone. Will the car's battery run?
advanced plasma accelerators.
Got questions about owning an
When you get
electric
those
car?
things engineered with
Get the
efficiency,
answers at goultralow.com.
Shut the door on
they don't
routine.
half pack a punch.
Start something new. Power your adventure.
Just the
and
rate
unlock
of fire
your
goes
life
through
with
the
Jeep
roof.
Renegade from £189 a month. With 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating, touchscreen, Bluetooth, sat-nav, and legendary Jeep capability. Visit jeep.co.uk to begin your journey today. Personal contract hire. Jeep Renegade 1.4 longitude manual. Initial rental of £1,134. 48-month term, 8,000 miles per annum until March 31st, 2018. Subject to status. Leases.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
Talk Radio. For those about to talk, we salute you. Talk Radio.
From Currently, Sky News Central, UKIP's leader, is fighting to keep his job after losing no confidence from senior officials.
Hynix, I want to make an APA Vulture with target lock breaker, just a pure cancerous PvP build.
Yep, that would do it. I mean, that's what I've got on these. I've got target lock breaker and dispersal, I think. Because when you're doing these assassination missions, it's not the actual guy you're going after that causes the problem. Especially when you've got target lock break and dispersal, he never gets a chance to fire at you. It's always the other craft.
Isotome we pucus antithargoid limpets now.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, get you down. Well, there's those. What are those Olympics that get rid of the caustic stuff. But you know what? I haven't really been into the old Thargoid thing. I've done a couple of runs on them and managed to kill one, but I find it a bit dull. I mean, you know, all those months of waiting for what? For very little.
There's repair limpets that remove caustic substance from ships.
Yeah, there is. But I mean, if you think about it, you know, 3 or 4 months of the Thargoids, and really it was one ship with 3 skins, with just the volume turned up a bit. You know, it's like, that was it. You know, 3 or 4 months of work.
Online and on DAB.
I think they were taking the piss a bit. Mind you, it was all free, so.
Debate and entertainment on the UK's premier forum.
Right, well, I'm going to cash this in, and I'm going to call it a night.
Overnights with Paul Ross
on Talk Radio.
Well, thanks for joining me, Heine.
Welcome back to me, Paul Ross, on the Late Early Show, overnight on Talk Radio. Huge thanks there to Howard Hughes for twisting all our melons with that amazing 3-hour dig, digging delve into the unexplained and the conspiracy.
Catch you some other time.
Hynix LOL, it was years for some of us. Hynix, hope to see you again, my dude.
No problem, fella. I'll catch you later. Have fun.
The leader of a team of women who've achieved something